In today's video, we're going back to the 1950s. I've got a Kodak Brownie 620 Model C, second edition, which came out in 1957, and I've got a Lancia Appia, and we've dressed Jamie up in the period as well. The 50s Brownies had moved on quite considerably from the pre-war ones. The viewfinders are much bigger and much brighter. The shutter has 2 speeds, which is basically bulb and a 50th of a second. There's one problem though. It's a 620 camera. Now, 620 and 120 are the same height, but the rolls are different widths. So in order to make it work, we're going to have to do a little bit of bodgery. And you can probably see that I've hacked the edges of the film off because you can't load a full width roller. You're going to have to take out your scissors and you're going to have to cut this ridge off the edge of your film. I've got a roll of T-Max 100 and a roll of Portra 400, and I'm going to be photographing Jamie dressed up in the period with this really quite fun little car.
It's worth mentioning at this point that the film I'm using is more valuable than the camera I'm using it in.
Some of you are probably wondering why I'm using a light meter with the Brownie. It's lucky though, because I've got a reading of a 60th f11, and this camera can only do a 50th at f11. There's no other exposure settings available. So you can do it one of 2 ways. You can manipulate the light around you, or you can just point the thing and hope for the best.
All of these old cars have this very petrol-y smell.
Olitography. The issue that I'm having with cutting the film back is Brownies never wind the film on very tightly. So I'm a bit worried about light leaks top and bottom from this bit. So it's straight in the back pocket for that one. There are 2 shutter settings on this, and actually when you're using it, it's quite hard to tell which one's which. So this bottom one is a 50th of a second, and the top one is bulb. I've had a bit of an issue, or a hiccup, with this camera and my plan as to how to use it. Now, it's fine cutting down your 120 roll to fit it in 620. The problem that occurs is when you try and use that same spool as a take-up spool. What you need for this type of camera is a metal take-up spool. So you can order them on eBay, they're about £4.50 each, and you need to do it for every single film. So the last one worked just fine because I was using the metal take-up spool that came with the camera. If I want to use another film, I have to use another metal take-up spool, because if I use a plastic one, this doesn't tend to grip very well and you can't wind the film on properly.
Technical challenges aside, I was really impressed by the first set of pictures we took on that camera. But I was going to have to order some more metal spools and wait before I could take more pictures.
So I'm just going to do 1 roll on this slightly better camera than the Brownie.
Not every camera from that era was as primitive as the box Brownie. In 1957, Victor Hasselblad released the first of the 500 series Hasselblads, which was a camera that changed photography forever. So in a way, I'm comparing the best camera to the worst camera of that era.
You don't have to slam the door.
What?
You don't have to slam it.
It's been about 5 months now and about 3,000 miles. But I did manage to get my hands on my metal spools. So I can put a couple of rolls of colour through this camera, which is something I really wanted to try. I love putting colour film through old cameras because you don't generally see it. So I'm going to give that a go. We're out in the Midwest in the US right now, and I'm barn hunting. I'm going to look for a really cool looking barn and just take some pictures of it with this in colour, and we'll see what we get. Still winding forwards, but it tends to get a bit stuck. That's 5 shots in, and it's starting to get really cold. That's not a good sign. That's really bad. As I shot that roll of film, the wind-on was getting stiffer and stiffer and stiffer, and as I took it out of the camera, I realized that it had literally cut the edge of the film off.
The metal in this camera is quite flimsy and it bends and creates sharp edges. Those sharp edges literally sliced through the film. I managed to save the roll, which I was quite surprised about, and I did get a couple of pictures, but that's something to watch out for.
This is my 3rd attempt now to take colour pictures on this camera. So I've reloaded the camera for one last try. I've really carefully smoothed out where I've cut the 120 roll down to 116. I've gone through the camera, and anywhere that it could be pressing or pushing on the film, I've straightened that out. And it seems to be, so far, running through the camera quite well. So I'm going to have one more go and take my last 8 pictures on this camera before it goes back on the shelf permanently. I like this view. And this camera's got such a long lens on it that if you want to take like a landscape picture, you've got to stand in the middle of a cornfield.
So why would anyone try and take pictures with a camera so basic it's not even as valuable as the film that you're using in it? Cameras like the Box Brownie are a bit of a paradox because they're incredibly simple, but they're actually very difficult to use. Or they're very difficult to get a good result out of, if that's what you're going for. And if you're going to do that, you need to be infinitely patient, and you need to accept that it's going to take you a while to master the limitations of these cameras. But like with anything that's challenging, when you do finally get it right, it can feel pretty good.
So that's it for the Kodak Brownie Model C.